So good evening, Huskies, and welcome to the Welcome to the Neighborhood event here for the City of Chicago. My name is Josh Proulx. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the Office of Alumni Relations for the UConn Foundation. I have the pleasure of being your host tonight, introducing this incredible panel of Huskies who come to you live from Chicago. As you all know, or may know, our Welcome to the Neighborhood series is normally an in-person event, but obviously given the scenario that we're all facing, we've decided to pivot a little bit and go virtual. So here from Chicago, we have a great, like as I mentioned, we have a great set of panelists for you to talk to you a little bit about what life is like in Chicago. Joining me today as well from the Alumni Engagement team is Lauren Davies, our Assistant Director for Chapters and Alumni Networks. Lauren will be handling all of our production aspects tonight, so if there are questions, feel free to type those into the Q&A toolbar on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. You can also use the chat function if you want to send something out to anybody in particular, or if you want to engage in a conversation with fellow Huskies. First and foremost as well, to those of you that are brand new to the Husky community and graduates of the class of 2020, welcome to our alumni family. I can tell you right now that you're joining one of the strongest, most important networks that you will ever come to know. To our more seasoned pups that are out there, welcome to you as well. We're glad that you're joining us, and we have some information for you as well, so stick around. Today, we are excited, as I mentioned, to bring you a panel of Chicago experts, people who have done what you are hoping to do or what you might have already done, and people who can speak to some of the most crucial info that you're going to need to know about life in the Chicagoland area. From apartment hunting to what bars are the best places to go, maybe the most friendly to Huskies, to traffic patterns, public transit tips and tricks, we hope to cover a little bit of about a lot tonight. So stay tuned for more coming soon. A couple of housekeeping items before we jump into the conversation tonight. For those of you that took advantage of our address and information update deadline during registration, your lanyards were actually mailed out last week, so check your mail for those. Next, all attendees currently are muted. We know that questions are going to arise, so feel free, as I mentioned before, to type those into the Q&A section of your toolbar, and we'll get to those throughout the presentation tonight. Additionally, as I mentioned, use that chat function. And last, we realize it's really hard to meet people in the current environment, so we've set up a happy hour for you after this event. So throughout the evening, you'll be getting different prompts inside of the chat. Lauren has just posted that just now in the chat function as well, with the information that you need to get yourself into the Zoom happy hour post this event when this concludes. When you get in there, don't forget to turn your camera on, grab your favorite beverage. We will all have one. So basically make sure that you have what you would like to find out if there's anything that we didn't cover tonight. We'll go ahead and jump into that once we get to that time tonight. So copy that link, make sure it's in your chat box. The other piece is you've got a million emails from us over the last couple of weeks, so the information's in there. And even just to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, you're gonna get an email mid-presentation tonight from us with that information, so it's at the top of your inbox. So make sure you check that as well. Now, on to tonight, what it's all about. We're gonna turn you over to some of my favorite people in this country and the part of the Husky Nation, some of the best and brightest and most fun people. And I can swear by that. I have experience with them out there. They're some of the best, and I'm leaving you in great hands. Moderating for us tonight is the one and only great Marty Horn. I like to call him Mr. Chicago. He has more information about the city of Chicago than I could have ever imagined when I first met Marty, and I've got some stories to share about that on a different conversation. But on behalf of the Alumni Relations Office, we'd like to thank all of you for taking the time tonight to join us, sharing your expertise, and helping our fellow community gain a better understanding what it's truly like to be a Husky living in Chicago. So Marty, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Well, thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. And welcome all Huskies to this conversation. And it will be a freewheeling conversation tonight. We've got a lot to talk about, and it'll be very loose and very informal. I'll introduce myself first, and then we'll talk to the panelists about several things. So I'm Marty Horn. I have been in I graduated with a BA in '73 and an MA in '75 in communications. And after a one-year stint in Cincinnati, I found my way to Chicago, where I worked in advertising as a marketing researcher since 1976 when I first arrived here. I currently live in a suburb of Chicago in Wilmette. I've been here since 1985, but for the first 9 years I was here, I lived in the Lincoln Park area. I'll talk a little bit later on about how I actually got to Chicago, but it has a very strong UConn connection. But let me turn it over now to Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Atad. I graduated in the School of Fine Arts with my major in graphic design in '97. I was the Vice President of Creative Services at TSYS, which is a credit card processing company in Long Island, New York. But now I'm doing contract art direction and graphic design work for the past couple of years. And also, just a fun thing, in the past year, I've also been a part-time tennis instructor at the Federation Sports Center. I've been in Chicago for about 16 years, and I've came here, well, I don't know, Marty, do you want me to say why I came here?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. My wife got a job opportunity in Chicago, and I was fortunate enough to work remotely from Chicago with my previous company that was in Norwalk, Connecticut. So I was commuting back and forth like once a week or once a month to Norwalk from Chicago.
Great. I'm going to go in alphabetical order here. Joe? Sorry to catch you mid-sip.
No problem. Hi, my name is Joe Jones. I graduated with a BA in 2005 in economics. After I graduated, I worked in downtown Hartford for a few years before moving to Greensboro, North Carolina. After Greensboro, North Carolina, moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And then after a few years in Phoenix, I moved to Chicago in July of 2016. I work in the life insurance industry and underwriting. I've been in that industry for about 15 years now. What brought me to Chicago was two things. My wife is from Wisconsin and she wanted to be closer to home, and I always wanted to live in a bigger city as well. So we picked Chicago, and that's how I found my way here.
Great, thanks. And by the way, Joe is the proud father of a 4.5-month-old son?
Yes, 4.5-month-old son in Chicago. I've gotten married and had a child, so it's a lot has changed since the day I moved here.
Yeah, indeed. Sam.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Samantha Odyniec, or Sam, I guess. I graduated in 2010 from CLAS with a BA in political science and a minor in human rights. And I'm originally from Chicagoland in the suburbs, lived here my whole life, went out to UConn, worked a little bit, and then came back. And I've been living in the city since 2012, where I went to law school and now work as an attorney at a mid-sized national firm doing toxic tort litigation and product liability litigation. And so, yeah, I moved back here to be closer to home as well and with family and go to law school and kind of be closer to home for that.
Great. And last but not least, Melissa.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa Windover. I graduated in 2015 with a degree in nutrition. After that, I moved out here for a dietetics program at Loyola. It was just a one-year program, but had rotations all over the city. And then after that, I got a job out here and have been out here ever since. Currently work at Kraft Heinz in the regulatory affairs group, so making sure our products comply with all regulations.
Great. By the way, when I mentioned earlier that a UConn connection brought me to Chicago, my graduate school advisor at UConn decided to leave academia to go back into private industry. He had previously worked in private industry in Chicago, became a professor at UConn, and then went back into the advertising business. And I was working in Cincinnati at the time, and he told me about a job at the agency that I ended up working at, because he was working there too. So he said, why don't you apply for this entry-level position, which I did, and I stayed at this place for 30 years, but it really is because of my professor who kind of greased the skids for me to get that job. So again, you kind of played a very strong role in my being here. Hey Josh, I'm just wondering, do you want to do that survey?
Sure, we'll get right into that.
Before we go into a discussion, we've got
Absolutely.
a few things that we want to learn about you, and then we're going to give you a quiz.
So the first one coming up on your screen right now is to answer a couple of questions for us, letting us know whether or not you're actually living in the Chicago area right now and how long you've been in the area. And it's okay if you're not, because we understand that people are using this as an opportunity to scout the area and figure out if this is a place for you to go. So 5 more seconds and we'll close this off. So right now it looks like we have a little mix of everything right now. So that's awesome. All right, I'll share that on screen real quick. So people that did answer, we have one that's actually there. We have a couple that are scatting it out and looking at potentially moving. So awesome.
Great.
All right, I'm gonna throw the next one up on here. We want to know who is here from class of 2020. Obviously, that is one area that obviously you guys have had an interesting experience, and it continues even into our Welcome to the Neighborhood series. So looks like the majority of folks are not. All right, I'll pop that on the screen. Looks like everybody here is not, so interesting. All right, and then before Marty's quiz, we have one other one here for you. Kind of a little bit of a redundant, but do you already have a job that's bringing you to Chicago? Or if you're already living there, that'll be helpful to know. And it looks like one has a yes. Process of deduction might say that the person living in Chicago may have the job in Chicago, so that's probably my thought there. All right, Marty, do you want to ask the quiz question now?
Okay, this is a little bit of trivia about Chicago. Why is Chicago called the Windy City? Because the hawk, meaning the wind, is stronger here than in nearly every other American city. 2, blowhard politicians endlessly bragged about the city in an attempt to get the World's Fair to come here in the late 19th century. 3rd, Mrs. O'Leary's cow was named Windy, and though Windy was incorrectly blamed for starting the Great Chicago Fire, Windy, and eventually Windy City, became synonymous with this 1871 catastrophic conflagration. And finally, the famous chili cheese footlongs in Comiskey Park, original home of the Chicago White Sox, were and still are known to have an unpleasant gastrointestinal effect. So put down your answer as to why Chicago's the Windy City.
All right, and we will close it there. All right, so it should be showing up on your screen. Looks like with the majority, the 60% that participated, think that it's the blowhard politicians, while 40% think it was the cow that caused the fire.
Astoundingly, no one picked the 4th one. Well, actually is B. It is B. Our politicians are known for bloviating, and it's a rich tradition in this city, and it started back in the days of the World's Fair, actually the Columbian Exposition of the 1890 and 1891. Okay, so let's open up the conversation. I'm curious as to where you guys live and what your neighborhood is like. And I'll just kind of throw this open. Anybody?
Well, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. I live in Logan Square, which is in the northwest suburbs from downtown. I've been here about 14 years, and I was renting in Bucktown, which is a little east of Logan Square, but it was very expensive to buy during the time. It was around 2005 I was looking, and we bought a place in Logan Square because of the price, and just it was very close to the Blue Line. And I was working closer to O'Hare at the time. My wife was working downtown, so it was a nice, it's about 25 minutes to O'Hare, about 10 to 15 minutes to downtown. So it was a nice like middle ground to go to. And then the bubble burst. So we had bought a condo here, and then the bubble burst. So we could have waited maybe a year or two more, but we still love it here. It's got great bars and restaurants, a very eclectic mix of local, international, and themed establishments here. It's got a nice neighborhood feel. It's close to parks and trails and green space. Logan Boulevard has a lot of green space, and then there's also a trail called the 606 that runs across Logan Square. Which
I'm actually going to be biking on tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm coming down there.
Yeah, great. I'm glad they reopened it up. The neighborhood is also good for young people and families who are looking. So there's also a lot of housing options here. It's a great area to rent and buy, whether you're looking for like a rehab 2 or 3 flat place, or brand new construction, or even a 1-family home. They have everything, a lot of different options here. And then the fun fact about Logan Square, a couple of fun facts. Logan Square has one of the largest farmers market in the city. They have it on Sundays. So you can take the blue line over and just get right off, and you're right by the farmer's market. Also, the mayor of Chicago lives in Logan Square, Lori Lightfoot. And one other fun thing, which I think Josh would like, is Revolution Brewing is here. So not only is the restaurant Revolution is here, but also the actual brewery with a tap room is in Logan Square. So.
And by the way, when Brian refers to the blue line, for those of you who may not know, there's a number of different subway and elevated lines in Chicago, and they all go to different parts of the city. The blue line is being prominent because it goes out to O'Hare, but you got the pink line, the blue line, the green line, the orange line, the purple line, I think, and the green line. Okay, who else? Where do you guys live?
I can let Joe and Melissa go first because I think I've lived everywhere that they've also lived. So I'll let them speak to that before I jump in with my myriad of neighborhoods.
Sure. Melissa?
Yeah. So I live in Lakeview. I've always lived in Lakeview the 5 years I've been here. But I love the area. I'm just a few blocks from the lake, which I love. I love the lakefront trail. So nice being so close. It's got a great neighborhood feel, you know, lots of trees, lots of great restaurants, and really convenient to downtown. It's just north of the city. I used to, not so much anymore, but commute up to the suburbs. So great to be close to public transportation.
How did you get out to the suburbs?
Yeah, so I would take like the purple line to the yellow line to a bus. So it was quite an adventure every day, but it wasn't bad. It took like an hour. So
I should mention that Kraft, Heinz, as well as McDonald's are two companies that had very big campuses in the suburbs and decided to relocate downtown to attract, I think really to attract a younger demographic.
Yeah, definitely a lot of companies have done that recently. So, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Uber is setting up shop in the old post office, which is now a huge office space, which is really, it's real. If anybody who's been who's currently living here, should try to at least get to the old post office and just check out the lobby because it's really, really impressive. Really impressive. Joe.
Yep. So I live in River North, which is just north of the Loop, which is would be considered technically our downtown area. It's really close to the lakefront and the Riverwalk and the Magnificent Mile, which a lot of people know for shopping. It's where mostly high-rise apartments are and the home of the old rock and roll McDonald's, for some people that don't know. I picked it because I wanted to be in a central location when I was moving to the city, where I could get to the airport, take the blue line to the airport, or get on any train and get to any neighborhood within, 15 to 25 minutes. It's a neighborhood where you could have small children or retire here pretty much in a condo. I think it's my favorite place, but it's also my only place that I've lived in Chicago. So I don't really know as much about the other neighborhoods. There's a lot of bars and restaurants in this area. If you're interested in that, that's probably what it's known for. A lot of bars and restaurants and shopping. And with there's dog parks everywhere. This is a very dog-friendly area where you're not going to walk down the sidewalk without seeing some type of doodle mix.
Yeah, a lot of small dogs too.
Mm-hmm.
Sam?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. So yeah, I've lived in Lakeview and River North. I spent all 3 years I spent 4 years in Lakeview, 1 year in River North, and then 3 years in South Loop. And I'm currently in Gold Coast. And so all 4 of those are along the Red Line, which is, I would say, the north-south train L system. And it goes from like super far north, but up to Wrigley Field and down to my beloved Chicago White Sox. And so I've lived along that line my entire time in the city. And, I picked Lakeview and River North for the same reasons that Melissa and Joel mentioned. And also because going to law school, I went to DePaul, and that was down in the loop, but right along the red line, so I could easily get to school. And then when I was working, also get to work really easily. And when I was in River North, and then even now, like Gold Coast is kind of directly north of River North. And then it's like Lincoln Park and then Lakeview if you're kind of going up from the loop. And so I still currently sometimes when I go into the office, I've been biking into work and have walked as well. And with South Loop, I was walking every day to work. That was immediately south of the loop on the red line. And I picked that spot so that I could easily commute to work. It also it's kind of a growing area, but it's right by the museum campus. So there's a lot of cool things to do there, right by Grant Park and the Lakeshore Trail. So I could use that as well. And it's also close to the Orange Line. And I used to travel a lot for work. And so the Orange Line is what takes you to Midway. And I'm also close to the Blue Line. So I would use either Midway or O'Hare, depending on which airport I needed to go to. And it was less than a 15-minute walk to either train station. So the South Loop was just really centrally located and a fun growing area with new restaurants and easy access to work. So
yeah, I think one thing that everybody's pretty much touched on is that this is even though it's a huge city, it's fairly easy to navigate. There's tons of transportation, either that you could take, obviously you could take cabs, you could take Uber, you could take Lyft, you could take divvy bikes. Scooters are now back in the city after a trial run last year. The L goes all over the place. And you can, and Sam mentioned this about biking. Chicago has become a really bike-friendly city. It still has a long way to go, but I think compared to other large cities, it's probably one of, if not the bike-friendliest city around. So you have, or it's very easy to walk too. And the other cool thing about Chicago, if you're not familiar with it, is it's not a grid system. And so if you know the address of a particular place, you can pretty much figure out exactly where you are in the city. And so it's a very, I call it very navigable. Yeah, I should mention where I started out. When I first moved here from Cincinnati, I was fortunate enough to have relatives who lived here. I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Hyde Park. And I lived with them for a couple of months before I ended up in Lakeview for the reasons like Melissa mentioned. It was just kind of a young area. It was very pretty. It was near the lake. It was near running paths. It was, at the time at least, it was very affordable. And I really, really enjoyed living there. But after I got married in 1984, my wife and I decided we wanted just a little bit more green space because the little tomato patch that she had in the side of our condo just wasn't cutting it. So we moved to the suburbs. I happen to live in, as I mentioned earlier, in Wilmette, which is about roughly 18 to 20 miles from the downtown area. But there's, the suburbs here are quite nice. You've got the northern suburbs, you've got western suburbs. You can, there's north is Evanston, which is where Northwestern is. There's Wilmette, there's Winnetka, all the way up. It's called the North Shore. You can go out west to Oak Park. If you go further west, you get to places like Naperville. There's LaGrange, Willow Springs, Western Springs. You can go south to Flossmoor and Homewood and Country Club Hills and Clarendon Hills. So there's a ton of, and all this is called the Chicagoland area. It takes in about 6 million people. But there's lots of stuff going on in the city, lots of stuff going on in the suburbs. And in fact, a lot of people that I know who lived in the suburbs are actually now moving back downtown, which is kind of interesting. I'm just wondering, if you're a newcomer to the city, what advice would you give people to, for apartment or house hunting? How would you go about doing that? Where would you look? What would you suggest people do to find out where to go, where to live?
Yeah, so I actually just moved in June to a new apartment. So same area, so I kind of knew the area, but there's a lot of apps and websites that are easy to use to help, find a place. I think I found my place on Zillow. definitely interesting to move during COVID and try to find the apartment during COVID. I know like when I was looking, you couldn't see an apartment that was occupied, so it was that much more difficult to find a place. So, you know, I definitely just recommend if you have the ability to walk around the area, see the places from the outside. I think that's really helpful and important. And just like, you know, it was helpful to narrow it down before I actually saw the apartment. So, yeah. And someone made a comment about broker's fees. That's definitely like a huge advantage to Chicago. I don't think there's any apartments that have broker's fees or anything like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll second that. So when I first moved to the city, like I said, I was born and raised in Chicagoland. So my parents are from the kind of northwest suburbs, actually farther north than Marty, and practically at the Wisconsin border. And so I, you know, in high school and growing up, like I was always down in the city, but I grew up in the suburbs. And so I kind of had an idea that like Lakeview and Lincoln Park are where a lot of college kids are, because that's where the DePaul campus is. And a lot of like young professionals are in that area. So I just started walking around and looking at places, just kind of looking at streets in those areas and being like, okay, what do I like this area? Do I see myself living here? And I found my first apartment just by actually walking down a street, and a rent sign had just been posted on the door, and they hadn't even put it up online yet. And my fellow roommate and I fell in love with it, and we're like, we want this now. And we actually found it that way, really old school. So, but then since then I've been using the online forums like Melissa mentioned, Zillow and like apartments.com or whatever else, and use those to kind of find my places. But again, walking around I think is really the best option. Someone also asked about West Loop, and when I was debating about my place in South Loop, I was also looking in West Loop, because those are both really easy access to the downtown area. And West Loop is super like growing, has a ton of restaurants, a really great area that's being built up pretty fast and is really popular right now. So I loved the area. The apartments I saw were just a little pricier than I wanted to spend, and were a little pricier than South Loop. So that's why I ended up picking South Loop, but both are really great neighborhoods. And I have a bunch of friends who live in West Loop and absolutely love it. So I'd highly recommend that as well. Even though I haven't lived there, I enjoy frequenting the establishments there. So.
Did you say did you just move to the Gold Coast, did you say?
Yeah, so yeah, my fiance owns a condo in the Gold Coast, so I still have my South Loop place for one more month, and then I'm actually officially moving. But we've been quarantining in Gold Coast the entire time.
Not a bad place to be entertained.
Yeah, exactly. It's been nice to a good location to like Lincoln Park for walking the dog and everything as well. So it's a really fun area.
Hey Joe, you know, what's it like raising a kid in the city? I know you've only have 4.5 months worth of experience, but I'm just curious about that.
And you add on top of that the quarantine, so it's we go for a lot of walks, and that's one of the best parts of Chicago. You can just go for a walk for 2-3 hours, and it's relatively safe and just part of the city. And so there's a playground nearby that you can take your kids to for like the swings and playground play sets and all that. But so for that, it's just pretty much that it's walkable, and he's in a stroller 90% of the time. Restaurants are kid friendly, some of them. But yeah, with the 4-month-old, that's pretty much. But you can definitely get around relatively easy with the stroller too. I mean, you can take the kid on public transportation with it. You can't really Uber or take a cab or Divvy or take a scooter with the kid, but you can get around easily with public transportation with the child.
Speaking of public transportation, have any of you taken public transportation recently during COVID? I personally have not, but so I'm curious but I've been reading lots of stuff about it. Brian, have you been taking public transportation?
Yeah, I have my dentist is downtown, so I do take the blue line, and it was definitely a different experience. Obviously, there's less people on there. They keep the cars fairly clean, and I wore my mask on there. When I got onto the car, it was during a peak time, and it was pretty quiet. I gotta say. But the great thing was that the trains were still running at the same times they were pre-COVID. So that was nice.
And you know, there's also commuter train, the metro system, which is more like train cars. And on those recently, at least, ridership is way down, but they're keeping the cars really clean. And well, depending on your perspective, the rides are free because there's no conductors coming through to collect your ticket. So that's kind of an unusual situation. But those trains run on a very set schedule, and if you're in the suburbs, that's usually one of the best ways to get downtown.
I've also taken rideshare like an Uber and Lyft, and I did notice that obviously they're abiding by regulations and protocols for COVID, but there was a lot less available at certain times. So I wanted to go downtown one time, and I literally had to wait 20 minutes for Uber or Lyft. And actually, I think the Uber had no cars available at the time. So that's one thing you might want to consider if you're in a rush to take a rideshare service.
When I first moved here, I obviously didn't know a soul other than my aunt and uncle, my cousin who was living here at the time. But what are some of the best ways to meet people and make connections and to network? This is actually one great way to do it, what we're doing right now, being part of the UConn alumni group. But what are some other ways? How'd you go about like meeting new people and making connections and just getting to know your way around?
Can I answer this first?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, when I first moved here, it was back in 2004, and never been to the city. I might have done a layover at O'Hare, but I had never actually stepped inside Chicago itself. So everything was definitely new to me, and I wanted to try different things when I moved here and meet new people. So there's three things that I did personally. One thing I did was I did sports. So I joined a couple of recreational leagues, which there's a lot of different leagues around here. This is definitely pre-COVID, obviously, that I'm talking about. But Sports Monster Chicago is pretty heavy here, and Chicago Sport and Social here. So I took up tennis league, a softball league, and a bowling league. And it was just a great way to explore different parks around the city, as well as doing a physical activity. So that was nice to meet people through different teams I was playing on and people that I was playing against. And there's still people that I play with to this day, which is nice. The second thing I did was from a work standpoint, I did some networking through different networking events throughout the city. There was one that I was doing on a regular basis when I came here. It was called Network After Work, which is still around, but I think they're doing more of a virtual version of it. And what they did is they held events around different venues around the city, and it was really informal. You would grab a cocktail, maybe pay it just a little bit of an entrance fee, and then you met like a variety of demographics and backgrounds. And I used that to get referrals and then have a good conversation with people. And then the third thing I did was I volunteered, not only for the UConn Alumni Chicago chapter, which I'll get to in a second, but I got involved in a local community by volunteering at Swedish Covenant Hospital, which is located in the Northwest side.
Which is now part of Northwestern Hospital, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is, just recently. So I was on the foundation's associate board. It was the junior board, and I was doing it for about 8 years. And the board was a group of young professionals that raised funds, increased public awareness, and performed community service on behalf of Swedish Hospital. So some things we did was we distributed snacks and goodies to the nurses during Nurses Week, and we distributed water during breast cancer walks, and then we did fundraising events for the hospital staff and community.
Cool.
So, and then the last thing, like I mentioned, was the UConn Alumni chapter. So here's a little bit of history about this Chicago chapter. I went to a game watch gosh, Marty, where was it? It was like out near O'Hare, I think.
Oh yeah, wow.
It was back in like,
yeah.
Yeah, it was back in like 2011, and there was no established committee for Chicago. And at the time, it was Marty, myself, and a person named Tom Rizzi, who was the founding member of the board or of the committee. And we just worked closely with the Alumni Association, and we got this Chicago chapter together. So from there, it's just, now is what it is right now. I love it. I love
Great.
now talking about it. So.
You'll talk a little bit more about that later. How about the rest of you? How did you guys go about networking?
When I first moved here, sorry, Sam,
Oh, it's fine.
I met a lot of people through my apartment complex, actually. They hosted happy hours, they hosted meetups, bar crawls, and they have a lot of alumni associations for the Big Ten. My wife went to University of Wisconsin, and we went to Badger watch parties for their football games. I also met people through my gym, through workout classes, and then just, you go to the same workout class, after a while you start to meet the people in the class. And also just, work, happy hours, stuff like that.
Now, I can interject, there's no shortage of health clubs in Chicago.
No.
There seems to be one almost on every corner.
Yeah, and if you've been to East Bank Club, it's definitely more of a social club than a gym.
Yeah, and that was one of the first ones too. That was a big deal when it opened up, God, a long time ago. It's a beautiful facility, but all these health clubs now are just, they're terrific. In fact, I think a lot of apartment buildings now have workout rooms in their own health clubs as well, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I have one in my building, but it's small, so I chose to go to like a health club, more of a social environment.
Right. You mentioned bars and restaurants. One of our favorite topics. What are some of the places you like to go to, Melissa?
I mean, there's no shortage of bars and restaurants. We're really lucky to have so many different options. I have like a gluten allergy, so I'm a little particular with the restaurants that I go to, but there's a restaurant group that has a bunch of restaurants around the area that I love going to the restaurants, like the Let Us Entertain You group. So lots of options.
If I could mention one thing, especially if you're a newcomer, on our public television station, there's a show called Check Please, where every week three regular people gather around, and each one picks a restaurant, and then the other two go and check it out, and then they review them. And this show has been on for years, and you never get tired of, because there's a new restaurant every single week, and you get to learn about some really, really interesting, cool places, many of which are downtown, others are out in the suburbs. And it covers the gamut from fine French food to barbecue, to hamburgers, to, steak places. And it's just interesting to hear the chefs of these places talk about their food, then to hear what the other people, how they quote unquote reviewed it. But it's a great way to learn about some of the really cool restaurants that are in this town, of which there's no shortage. And I think, was it Brian, you mentioned Revolution Brewing?
Yeah, I did.
Because again, one of the things that this city is known for is craft breweries. And we actually had one scheduled for one of our events, but then COVID hit, so that kind of put the kibosh on that. But care to talk about some of those brew pubs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about Chicago is that microbrews is just a big thing here, and I know that it's around in different cities like Austin and Boston and stuff, but I think there's different areas that have breweries scattered all around the city. And so if you're just looking to go have a beer, you can go to a tap room, and there's some in the south side, north side, and try out and sample different beers. But then you can also go to beer gardens. There's like different beer gardens all around the city, and it might be in like a small building, and you just go in the backyard and sample beers, or you can go to just a regular restaurant that has all different types of local beers. Yeah.
I was going to ask Sam, oh, there she is. Sam, since you've lived in so many neighborhoods, are there particular restaurants and bars that that are among your favorites?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I like trying to find new places all the time. But something that I wanted to hop in on that kind of prior question about what restaurants are doing right now. Like I live right off Clark and Division in the Gold Coast right now. And every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a street that normally has cars going through has been blocked off, and all the bars have seating outside. And they're doing that in quite a few different neighborhoods right now. Like Melissa and I actually went out to brunch a couple weeks ago and up in Lakeview, and like that whole area was closed off as well. And so I think that's been really fun to go have that expanded seating outside and like try these different places. And for us, like where I live, it's a block away. So literally every Friday after the Bears game, after the White Sox game, or for the end of the White Sox game, like the one place even has TVs outside still, so you can watch games out there. And it still kind of gives you that atmosphere. So like Butch McGuire's is a super famous spot that's been around for forever.
Forever.
Yeah, exactly. That and the Lodge, where like Bill Murray still hangs out when he's in town. And so I've been frequenting those places, but Lou Malnati's and Pisano's and Pequod's are some of my favorites for pizza. Still haven't been to Chicago Oven Pizza Grinder, but that's on our list.
Right. Josh has been doing the full court press on us on that one.
Exactly.
For
Next
those of
time.
you who don't know, they serve the pizza upside down, right? Is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like a pot pie pizza, and it's like served upside down, and then they flip it over, and has to be super unhealthy, but looks incredible. So I'm excited to try that place. It's actually kind of walkable from me, so I'm excited to try it. And I've also been frequenting the Let Us Entertain You spots because they have points, and a lot of them do like takeout stuff. And something that's been interesting is the like RPM Italian and RPM Steak restaurants have been doing these like Zoom dinners where you order a dinner like during COVID, go pick it up, and then they do like a Zoom wine tasting and dinner with it. So it's always themed. So like Sicilian or Tuscan or some of the ones that we've done. And you get a bottle of wine and a 4-course meal, and they kind of walk you through the wine pairing. And the food has been incredible, even with like picking it up an hour before the Zoom call starts. So that's been really fun to do during this time as well. So RPM is kind of heightened up on my list more so than it had before.
Joe, how about you? You got any favorite haunts?
Oh, so the thing I love about Chicago, one of the most, I think, is the food. So before COVID hit and before the baby, I think we went to dinner every Friday night. We picked a different restaurant for the past 3 years. We've gone to a different restaurant, and we don't go to the same one on a Friday night. It's the best. That's like the best part about Chicago. I love the breweries, as Brian mentioned. There's a Mars Brewery in the Bridgeport, which is one of my favorite ones to go to. There's also the brewery Maplewood. So those are some of my favorite ones. And they're also baby friendly because you can sit outside with a baby in a stroller and have a craft beer. But other than food and breweries, no one's really mentioned the sports here.
I was going to bring that up next.
Prior to COVID, I mean, the Cubs games are so fun to go to. The White Sox games are easily accessible. They're also fun, and they're priced a little bit better than Cubs games. Blackhawks games are amazing. I've even been to a Bears game, which is fun too. So the sports here and then just going to a sports bar and enjoying the games with the other fans is also pretty cool.
And by the way, well, Samantha's not, Sam's stopped her video, but Brian is in front of Wrigley Field and Samantha's in front of what's now called G-Rate Field, which I can't utter that. I have to still have to say Comiskey. I just can't say G-Rate. Oh, Sam, you're not in front of Comiskey anymore.
Sorry, my lighting got messed up my background, so I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, I'm a huge White Sox fan, so I think I mentioned sports a little bit. I have been going out to the bars to watch some of the games, even though we can't be there in person. It's fun to go out and just check them out. And I'm growing up here, a huge Bears fan, like huge Sox fan, huge Blackhawks fan, and like it was really tough to not be able to go to the games this year, but it was great at least having some options to be able to watch them and still kind of feel part of a community here by the ways that the bars and restaurants have like adapted.
Yeah, the nice thing about going to places like Comiskey and to Wrigley is that the L lines stop right at the park, and you're usually no more than a block or two away from both places. The red line goes to Wrigley, as Sam mentioned earlier, and the orange the red line goes to the red line.
Yeah, it's called the Crosstown Classic because and the red line goes both
to both places.
To both, and so like from my place in South Loop, it was 18 minutes door to door to get to the Sox, and like maybe 30 minutes to get to the Cubs. Like it's so easy to get between the two.
And in those rare instances in which both teams are playing home games, and one's during the day and one's at night, you could literally see one game, presumably at Wrigley, hop on the red line and go down to Comiskey and see the night game, which is pretty cool. And just for those of you who are sports fans, the Bulls, who have been, to call them mediocre would be too kind, just hired a new coach, Billy Donovan from Oklahoma City, but also he coached at Florida for many years. And in fact, I think we might have beaten them, didn't we? On our way to the championship a few years ago. I think we beat his Florida.
And that was the year that we volunteered with the Florida group at the Chicago Food Depository.
Right. Chicago Food Depository is a huge warehouse on the south side that provides food to local food pantries. It's really quite an operation. And when we do our UConn Cares events, we tend to alternate between the pet shelter and the Chicago Food Depository. And the year that we happened to beat Florida in the semifinals, I guess it was, quarterfinals, whatever, we, as luck would have it, we teamed up with folks from Florida who were also volunteering there. Like, I'll never forget what they said when they saw us coming in. They said, "Oh, not you guys." You know, if you're a tourist or if you're new to the city, what would you, I'd like to hear from each of you, what would you tell people is like the can't miss thing you got to either do or see while you're here? Let's say you have like 24 hours or so. What would you say, okay, you got to do X?
Can I go? Can I jump in on this?
Sure, go ahead.
So I thought about this question long and hard, and I think my answer, I think the number one thing to do, especially if it's winter, but a clear day, go up to the 96th floor of the John Hancock and have a drink at the Signature Lounge. You don't need to have dinner there. That's on the 95th floor. Go to the 96th, have a drink, and it costs the same as going up to the top of the John Hancock just by having a drink there. And the women's bathroom has the best view of the city anywhere. But if you're here for 24 hours, what I recommend is starting like at Montrose and taking Lakeshore down, and you can kind of go all the way down to like the museum campus, Lakeshore to Michigan, and I think you can stop and see whatever different areas you want to, whether that's Lincoln Park Zoo, Wrigley Field nearby, and then going down and seeing the Magnificent Mile, stop at the John Hancock there for a drink, continue down, and you can see all the crazy shops and fancy stores and just kind of the water tower. Like, you can see so much. Then you can stop by the Art Institute, the Bean, and head down and see, the Field Museum, the Shed, and Soldier Field. And I think that shows you some different neighborhoods in the city, but also gives you a lot of time and like ability to do different stuff, see the river walk and everything. So that's my recommendation, to kind of get a good view of like the city. And you also can see North Avenue Beach, and like the beaches have kind of been closed this summer, but for the most part, we're actually a beach town, even though it's on the lake. And you could ride your bike down the Lakeshore Trail too, if you wanted to do that instead. You just have so many options, and there's so much to see even in that small space, but you kind of get a lot.
Melissa, how about hiking? That's great. And by the way, there are tons of, we're probably not going to get onto this tonight unless you do it during the happy hour, but there's a ton of really good museums in this town. Art history, Chicago Art Institute, Museum of Modern Art, Field Museum, Chicago Science Industry. I mean, there's tons of them. Melissa, what would you say like your can't miss?
Yeah, so definitely second the signature room. I love taking people there. Definitely very touristy, but I love the architecture tours. I've probably done like 4 or 5 of them, and I feel like I've learned something new every time, but it's a really cool way to see the city, see the different areas of downtown, learn about the buildings, and then grab a drink or something on the river walk, which they've really built up and is a really, really nice area now.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too. I would say the architectural tours are really fantastic, especially the one on the lake.
Yeah.
Really good. We're kind of running close to our time limit here, but I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you, what are some good ways to continue being part of the UConn alumni community? Obviously, this kind of thing is invaluable. But what other ways would you suggest a newcomer to the city who's a graduate of UConn to get networking?
Well, I can answer a couple of those. Like, I would say join our local alumni events that we have. I mean, right now, obviously, with COVID, it's kind of a little less face-to-face, but back pre-COVID, we did a lot of game watches, and we did game watches at different areas, but we now picked a spot called George Street Pub, and Lincoln Park, right? Yes, Lincoln Park. And it's more of our home for game watches and get-togethers. So whenever we have a basketball game watch or a football game watch, we would all meet there. And it was a great way to meet everybody, whether they're older alumni or just recently came to the city. Mm-hmm. And then I would suggest joining our committee. I mean, the 5 of us are just a few of people that are part of the community. We have a couple more people, but I find that, working and talking with this group has definitely helped me stay connected with UConn really well. And we throughout the years, we not only have fun with the events that we throw, but also we share ideas, and it's really a good group of people. And then the third thing I would say is just go onto the foundation website. I mean, it has a ton of different information about staying connected, and there's a calendar of events that are going on, especially virtual events that are going on right now.
Yeah, one of the nice things about being on the committees, we can sort of help guide what events we're going to participate in during the calendar year. Not to steal Josh's thunder, but we have one coming up actually it's going to be in December, where we're going to be talking to one of the aldermen who just happens to be a UConn graduate. So by on this committee, becoming involved, you get to an extent help set the agenda for the year.
I think too, going to the events and taking the time to talk to as many people as you can. I think we have a really great group. Everyone's really approachable, but definitely take the time to get to know people.
Yeah, and just to second that, I really agree with Melissa. And what I would say too is we only have a short amount of time here. If you're curious about, Lake Forest, West Loop, wherever, I think any of us would be willing to talk with you another time. So don't hesitate to reach out on, any form of social media and chat, because we're all excited and happy to kind of share our experiences here clearly and continue expanding our group and our network. And I think that's one of the best things about UConn Alumni, but especially UConn Alumni in Chicago, is we're all super friendly, and it has kind of become a family here. And so we welcome everyone into that family and are excited for new people to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, Joe is not necessarily on the original committee, but he's a relative newcomer. He was more than willing, I think.
Josh did some no interesting, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be part of the group. It's been awesome.
Great. Well,
I have ways, Marty. I have ways.
I think that about wraps it up. We're fast approaching the happy hour.
Well, before we do that, we actually received a question.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, in light of some of the times, I think it's very relevant to the times that we're living in right now. The question comes in as to how diverse is Chicago, and are people tolerant of different cultures and different identities?
Can I speak to that real quick? So actually, some of the questions we had talked about before this, that's actually my favorite thing about Chicago is I think no matter who you are, where you come from, what your interests are, you can find a group here and that is accepting of you and that you fit in with. Yes, I love sports and that's great, but I know there's also artsy people who tend to more go towards Logan Square or Wicker Park, and that works for them. And you can go to a ton of plays, you can go to comedy shows, you don't even have to know that sports are a thing, and you can still have a group in this city. And so I think no matter what interest you have or anything, I lived in Boys Town for 3 years and it was such a fun area. That's the LGBTQ plus area of the city, kind of within Lakeview East. And that's just down the street from Wrigleyville, which is a huge sports area. And all of those groups get along, and it's such a great city. It's a city of neighborhoods, but everyone still gets along and is accepting. And so no matter what, I think there's a place for you in Chicago.
Yeah, the ethnic diversity is astounding too.
Oh yeah. I can go get my Polish pierogies very easily, but also I live next door to Chinatown and love getting food from there. No matter what, there's something. Pilsen is close to me as well, when I was in South Loop. So yeah, I think no matter what, there's something for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Sam's saying. I find that New York is a melting pot, and so is Chicago, but as being the third largest city, I find this area to be very affordable, but also manageable. You find friendly faces all around you, and it's not a concrete jungle, as some people say about New York or LA. I really find that being in the Midwest, it's still a metropolitan area and still a melting pot of people, very diverse.
I agree with Sam and Brian, what they've had to say about the area. There's something for everyone here. You kind of just have to look for it, and it's here. It's here.
You have to look for it, but it's not hard to find.
It's not hard to find.
All right. Well, our thanks to the panel here. Our thanks to Marty for leading our discussion today. Before we head over to our happy hour, I'm going to ask Lauren to drop one more time into the chat. She already beat me to it. I didn't even see it. The link to the happy hour is there. So we are going to head over there in just a minute. And as Marty mentioned, we are going to be having an event coming up that's sponsored by the Chicago Alumni Network. We actually have the department chair for the Department of Public Policy from UConn, who's going to be doing a fireside chat with us with Alderman Samantha Odyniec, who is a graduate of our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences for the city of Chicago. The tentative date we have for that is December 2nd, so you can tentatively mark your calendars. There'll be information coming out about that shortly. And hopefully we'll be able to get that out to everybody that's interested. And it is going to go nationwide, so it is not exclusive to the city of Chicago. So the fun part about living in a virtual world is we could bring this to anybody everywhere. So again, I can attest, I think the word that always resides in my head when I come back from Chicago visiting this crew is Sam's kind of hit the nail on the head by saying it's a family. One of the things that I think that I've learned in my time working in alumni relations is that each city has its own unique family and its unique network. What's unique and special to Chicago is that all of them mean it when they say that they're friends outside of just working on the committee. And it had nothing to do with them knowing each other while they were at UConn. It was all about that UConn commonality when they got there. So I would strongly encourage everybody, no matter what city you end up in, to exercise that UConn commonality that you might have with some folks that are living in that city, because it truly opens some doors and some friendships that are going to quote the alma mater, ever remain, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. So definitely make sure that you do that. This crew is one of those, and we hope you stick around and you join us in the happy hour to get to know them a little better. So we are going to drop that here, and we're going to switch over, and we'll have a chance to reconnect with everybody. And Brian's beating us to us. He's getting his glass of wine out ready to go. So we encourage you to do the same, and we'll see you in just a moment on the other side. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.